My friends, the time has come to go through all six now,
I'm back.
Terminator movies and rank them worst to best with Film Trigger. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and joining me right now is Stevie from Film Trigger. What is up?
Hey Durbin, how you doing, man?
So excited that we're actually doing this together now. After doing all these Terminator videos separate, it's awesome to finally come together and actually talk to you about your thoughts on these movies.
Yeah, not just weird random phone calls when either one of us get a crazy idea for something.
Which we had a lot of crazy ideas in the midst of this, and it's been an absolute blast. So very cool to come together with this.
Yeah, I enjoyed every minute of it. It was quite the learning experience for me. So
yes, that's good. I've had a lot of those myself. For those of you that don't know, Stevie and I went to high school together. So that's how far back our friendship goes. And then about a year or two ago, he started his channel, Film Trigger, and that's been a great way for him and I to reconnect.
Yes, I sure did, man. And inspired by you, actually. You know, I didn't even know being a YouTuber was a thing. You know, and then I started catching your stuff, and I'm like, man, I want to do that.
Well, like I said, Stevie and I went to high school together, so our friendship goes way back. His channel is doing really good, and it's really cool to watch it grow. And definitely head over there to Film Trigger, hit that subscribe button. So here we go, diving into these movies, worst to best. Can you believe there are 6 Terminator movies now and 3 attempts for a third one?
Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah. Well, as Stevie and I go through our rankings worst to best in the comments, let us know what are yours. Stevie, kick us off with your top 2, or bottom 2.
My bottom 2. Well, I had to really think about this one because in my reviews, I had an obvious F for Genisys.
Yeah, you did.
But when thinking about this ranking, I actually decided to go with Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines for the absolute worst.
Whoa. Why the change up? Interesting.
Well, given that Genisys let me down greatly, its rewatchability is better to me because of the nostalgia that they hone in on. You know, like I get to go in and watch Arnold Schwarzenegger fight himself. In Rise of the Machines, I get him in a male strip club, and that's just not cool, man.
You know, it's funny because I didn't think about it that way, the rewatchability factor of Genisys. After you've been let down, yeah, there's a little nostalgia factor.
Yes, exactly. And revisiting that first Terminator movie, you know, through a different set of eyes, you know, through a different director. I don't know, that part is kind of fun to me. So that's why it eked its way out of my last spot. Definitely Genisys is number 5.
Well, coming in for me at number 6 is Terminator Genisys. I just kept that one in my bottom. And, you know, you're right, I like the nostalgia factor, and I like Arnold fighting Arnold. That kind of stuff is really fun to go back and watch. I just can't get over Jason Clarke and Jai Courtney. Like,
oh, yeah.
They are so charismaless and so flat. And John Connor is supposed to be this amazing character, and what an awesome idea for the machines to grab a hold of him and use him for evil and change him at the molecular level. But then to have such a flat performance out of that, it couldn't win me over at all. And when those two were on screen together, it was nothing.
Yeah, I felt like Jason Clarke I felt his John Connor would just try to sell me a car.
Yeah, I guess I don't think about it too much. You
know, yeah, I didn't buy the casting at all in that movie.
Genisys just, like, while it has good moments, especially when Arnold has that moment where he says, Kyle Reese,
Protect my Sierra.
It's not enough to make me, like, put this anywhere else but last. And then my number 5 is Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. And I put this one above because, honestly, if you could just kind of get over the fact that it's rehashing Terminator 1 and 2, and that's all it is a total rehash, you still have the fun of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you still have a lot of really good action sequences. And I love mindless action Arnold movies, and that's what T3 is for me.
Oh, you're absolutely right. If you want a good copy and paste, you know, Terminator 2 type of story, but not Terminator 2, then Rise of the Machines is for you. I'm going Salvation for my 4th one. I loved the concept of Salvation. I think it was such a cool idea, and they could have gone really, really good places with it. but there was too many cooks in the kitchen, and it kind of didn't know what kind of movie it was going to be. I loved the idea of seeing the story, of Kyle Reese and John Connor, meeting up in this post-apocalyptic world, leading up to how Kyle Reese gets sent back, which would have came in the future movies. That's such a cool idea. But even though Christian Bale was a great John Connor, he felt, shoehorned into the movie. I didn't, like, he was an afterthought. With the Sarah Bottom Carter character, I don't know, it just all kind of became discombobulated for me near the end, and it just seemed like a whole bunch of different ideas got thrown in the mix, and they're all like, well, let's just use all the ideas. Almost 3/4 parts of the way in, it was a good movie. Like, I was really following it, but I don't know, they just didn't hit the nail on the head. And then I think the lack of fan service is also what ultimately, made this movie a not box office success. So that leaves Dark Fate as my third. It was obviously a good closer to the trilogy. I like the continuation of T2. It's the only third movie in the series that I could honestly watch, back to back with T2 and be like, okay, this is a direct sequel to that. Unlike Rise of the Machines, I just can't do that. They completely negate everything in T2 in Rise of the Machines. What happens after you change the future? So when it comes to direct sequels, Terminator Dark Fate, it takes the cake for sure. Does it have its problems? Yeah, it sure does. There's one thing, now that I'm thinking about it, that drove me crazy in that movie, and that is the Arnold Schwarzenegger, de-aging at the beginning of that movie. It drove me crazy. I didn't even know if he was, I thought that was a different actor. Like, I thought it was like, did they just bring in some bad lookalike, to play the T-800? And then they kind of close up, you get panned in on his face much closer. And I'm like, no, that's CGI. I mean, what was that about? Sarah Connor looked great. She looked just like she did in T2. What went wrong there? I mean, Genisys was better.
I've been waiting for you.
But it's the best of the worst, I guess. It's not really, I wouldn't even call it worst, but when you got 3 third films, choose one, and this is the one I choose.
Our 4 and 3 are exactly the same. For me, at number 4, it's Terminator Salvation. I liked it. I liked the totally different perspective on things. I like them showing us John Connor as the great leader. I mean, even I like the fact that he faces the Arnold Terminator at the end. First off, that was awesome, and the dun-dun-dun-dun as soon as he appears. But then even like when Marcus is freezing that Terminator and he claws John Connor's face and we get to see the origin of his scar, like little details like that were really fun for me. And so him still listening to the Sarah Connor tapes, all of that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that part too. Specifically when the Terminator scratches his face. That movie's riddled with great callbacks like that. Very, very subtle fan service.
And I like the idea of Marcus because I liked the question that he rose, because a lot of Terminator is fate and free will, like kind of just constantly going back and forth between the question of if there's fate, is there free will, do we have free will, or are we fated? And then here's Marcus, kind of like this micro example of that, as he's this hybrid, doesn't realize that he's a hybrid, befriends John Connor, figures out he's a hybrid, tries to get John Connor into Skynet in San Francisco. And granted, this is through a series of coincidences, and that's the weak part of this, but if you take that out and just kind of pretend for a second, the idea that he didn't realize that was part of his program was to portray John and get him there, it makes you question just even in his life, well, what was fate? What was free will? Did he ever have free will? And then he uses free will and rips off that remote and goes to help John Connor.
Definitely good character development with Marcus Wright. But I agree with you about the whole him being programmed to bring John Connor back. Like, that just doesn't work for me in that movie.
I mean, if they had just gotten a hold of Marcus at the beginning, it would seem more like Marcus was a plant and this was just part of Skynet's plan. But it took this weird series of coincidences for him to run into Kyle Reese and all of that, and that's the part I don't buy. The program part is kind of an interesting idea, but too many coincidences. Number 3, Dark Fate, because I agree with you. Of the 3 third movies, this is the one to choose, because this one to me was the natural progression out of Terminator 2. If Terminator 1 is all about fate and the time travel and it's all this closed loop, Terminator 2 took it to the next level by showing free will, and can free will change that fate? And we get to watch a good Arnold Terminator grow a sort of conscience. Then you get into T3, and as much as it's kind of weird he kills John Connor at the very beginning, I still thought it was interesting that, well, he had no more orders, so he had to find a purpose. So he protects this woman, he protects her son, and kind of has a family. So he gets the growth and development that he started to get in Terminator 2. So in this one, we get to see the latter half of that development and see fully what he could have developed into. And they won. They changed fate, and there's no Skynet. But the dark fate of the human heart is we still created something, and we got Legion.
Yeah, humans, we're bound to destroy ourselves for sure. Yeah, when it comes to Dark Fate and that whole... I honestly didn't know John Connor dying at the beginning was going to be such a big deal. Like, I didn't even comment on it in my review too much. I just accepted, like, okay, cool, John Connor's gone. I buy that. And I did like Arnold Schwarzenegger's, the take on the Terminator that he does in this film. Yeah, it's a nice change of pace. We've never, ever seen him like that before. It was great comedy, but all these subplots they had to add in just so, like you said, so it can kind of continue his development that he was getting in T2 and bring it into there. They kind of had to, suspension of disbelief the crap out of this movie to kind of get him in that position, in that mindset, and aged at the right age that he would be if he hadn't have died in T2.
I do have to say that is just kind of a weak thing, but, I mean, it's hard to do these movies without Arnold. And we saw that in Terminator Salvation. Like, that dude can show emotion without showing emotion. It is hilarious to sit there and listen to him dryly talk about drapes and how he had this one client for a kid's room that wanted a solid collar, and he said, "Don't do that." Stuff like that is hilarious, and you gotta have Arnold to do that.
It was like watching your own grandpa, just tell stories. It was fun. It was interesting. And even though the story to get him there and how he became that type of Terminator, is a bit questionable, it doesn't bother me all that much. It only bothers me when I start to really harp on it and focus in on that. But there's so much more of this movie to focus in on. And with the comedy that he brought, it kind of forgives that kind of rushed subplot, to get him there.
Yeah, and I don't know. I find it easy to forgive something like that just because I'm so happy he's there. And I thought that was really creative to bring him to this emotional point that he's at, because that's the high point of Terminator 2, when he sees John Connor crying and he says, "I now understand why you cried, but I can never do that." And then gives his life. I mean, this was Sarah Connor and John Connor was the family he almost had, and then he had to give his life. So it's kind of cool to kind of see him have that. And then the dynamic between him and Sarah Connor, that he actually took John Connor's life, and his way of expressing his sorrow for that was to give her a purpose. It's like, interesting. So things like that I found well written.
Yeah. Now there is kind of a questionable loophole in that movie, as there are many when you deal with time travel movies. But I didn't really think about this until I watched Cody Leach's review, where Danny and Grace and the Rev 9 are in the bridge. How did he get those coordinates? If he's getting coordinates from, the Skynet timeline, something doesn't add up there.
But I don't think, because there's a line that he said, and I don't think he's getting it from Skynet. Like, I don't think he knew about those other ones because of Skynet, because what he said, it was something like a chronal displacement that he can detect even days before, because like that displacement affects like the days before and the days after. And I think through that chronal displacement, he was able to figure out the exact time and location of where they were going to fall. And I think he knew, he was able to sense the displacement in time, so he got it all the way through Skynet, and then Legion was something different, but it was still that displacement of time, and he was able to sense that. And so that would be what I would think, because of one quick line that he said.
Yeah, it's kind of like in Genisys, you know, when Kyle Reese is remembering 2 timelines, and he kind of gives that quick explanation. Oh, well, it's possible with the Nexus time flow. that one necessary line that bridges any sort of, you know, any sort of what could be common sense to make this sound okay.
Yeah, and I feel like it had a little bit of that feel to it, but I don't know. Like, time travel is so hard to do, and so I figured, you know what? Whatever. It's reasonable enough that he, a robot from the future, would have these sensors that can sense a weird chronal time displacement wave and kind of could mathematically figure out when and where they're gonna land. It's stupid, but it's time travel, and time travel is stupid.
Time travel!
It's called suspension of disbelief.
I see this as an absolute win.
Were you sad when Arnold gave his life again?
No, I was expecting it, but he really got me with the "for John" line. You know, that's when I'm like, duh, you know, biting my knuckles, you know, quivering lip, you know.
Yeah, that was a really, really good line and a good way. In both movies, he died in a really great way.
Yeah, he did. But in this one, they gave him something he didn't have in the last one, and that was heart. He was the heart of this movie, and it's so ironic.
Yes, it is. And the T2, he was growing that heart, which was awesome. But now he is the heart, and so again, it was the right growth. This is the right sequel for T2.
I'm going with my second place, the original Terminator movie. Again, this kind of goes back to rewatchability. When I go to, you know, put a Terminator movie in and I see T1 or T2, I'm going to go for T2. I mean, that's like the gold standard, Terminator 2. So that you can't beat that movie. Especially, well, I mean, not in the Terminator series anyway. Now, but the first Terminator movie started it all, and it is a fun movie to sit down and watch and enjoy and be immersed in, you know, but man, it did not age well.
No, it did not at all, especially that fake Arnold face.
Oh, I know, ironically, like in my first Terminator review, you know, I kind of spliced in, you know, when he says
the 600 series had rubber skin. We spotted them easy. But these are new. They look human.
Well, this is awkward. Man, that was bad. That was real bad.
I couldn't even figure out why not just put a makeup appliance on his face? Why go the weird rubber robotic head looking in the mirror? That was terrible.
I would imagine that there's some screen tests out there somewhere with a plate on his face that we will never see, and whatever that is will probably explain why they decided to go this route instead.
That's true. I guess that's true. I wasn't on set.
Yeah, me neither. I'm really just making this all up right now. It's all a guessing game. But yeah, but Terminator 1 is a great story, and you know, it has great qualities. Like the exposition in that film was done so masterfully. You know, it was, you know, it wasn't just like, okay, sit down, here's what's going on, and now we're letting the audience know everything. You know, it happened organically, and that's what I really enjoyed about that, because it kept up with the pace of how the movie was flowing, and it wasn't like, okay, we gotta stop and figure out what's going on. You know, it was very well illustrated and explained all the way through the movie. But then Terminator 2, the big dog, man. I mean, you can't beat that movie. You cannot beat that movie, and that's why it lands number 1. I think everybody that did this ranking out of, you know, you and me and then Cody and Sean, I think Terminator 2, I think, is probably all of our favorite movies in one way or another, at least in our top 10. I can watch that movie over and over and over again. Even the extended cut that I have on DVD, it has a couple of things that I don't really need to be in there, but it don't matter. This is Terminator 2. This is the movie you watch when you watch Terminator movies. And it was the movie that introduced me to the Terminator franchise. I never even saw Terminator 1 until, you know, many years later. It's nostalgic, it's the one, it's the big daddy, and you can't beat it.
I don't remember which was the first Terminator movie I saw. Like, I saw them a long time ago, and so rewatching these was the first time I think I'd actually watched them since college. And so coming in for me at number 2, just like you, it's Terminator 1984. And it's funny because when I watched it and then I was watching Terminator 2 like right after it, one thing I really liked about the first Terminator was how dark it was. I just really enjoyed that dark feel of the first one. It was so ominous. It was so good. Like you said, it was organic. Like the narrative was organic. The story was organic. To see Arnold be a bad guy, because I'm so used to seeing him as, the good Terminator, I forgot how great he is even as the bad Terminator. I would not want to be hunted by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so, like, all of that I thought was really cool. And I loved the whole closed loop of time. Like, I keep talking about the picture whenever I talk about it, but I love seeing Kyle Reese with the picture and telling, Sarah Connor about the picture. Then the movie ends where the kid snaps the picture and she puts it in the passenger seat of her car. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It's time travel. It's gonna happen. So, like, all of that I just thought was so incredibly cool. So I loved it. I loved the action. I loved the dark feeling. Hated the rubber Arnold Schwarzenegger head, but it's forgivable because, that was so long ago.
Yeah, the horror aspect of that movie really kind of gives it a unique thumbprint, in this franchise. And honestly, I wouldn't have mind seeing a little bit more in that in the other films, at least a little bit more. It really dances on two different genres there, like a horror and sci-fi. And even James Cameron himself actually came up with a term that he wanted to call this style of movie, because he didn't like it being called a horror or a slasher. So he came up with tech noir. And if you've seen the first movie, you know that that's also the name of the nightclub where, Kyle Reese and a Terminator meet up for the first time, to kind of fight for Sarah Connor.
And that was an awesome scene. Like, that whole fight scene was just epic.
Yeah, and we kind of get that, played again in Terminator 2, in the hallway scene. It's that initial meetup, the good guy versus bad guy first battle,
I gotta say, so obviously number 1 for me is Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So since you're talking about the hallway scene, let me just get to that. The thing that's awesome about that scene, I wish I could have somehow watched that movie fresh and not know Arnold was the good guy. How cool would it be to actually feel the tension James Cameron is setting up in that scene, to not know, really, are they both bad and coming for him? What's going on here? And then to see Arnold defend him. Like that, how great of a moment would that be if back in the day when it came out, the trailers didn't ruin it? And how great would it have been now if, I could just make myself not know that? Yeah,
definitely would have been a great quality to add, and going in there, completely clueless of how this movie would have panned out. I honestly don't remember if I knew that when I first saw this movie or not, because I was one of the ones that saw it when it first came out. And I was, what year was that? Like, what year did that come out again? Like 91, 92, something like that. So I was like 9 years old, I was about that same age as John Connor, which kind of made that film much more relatable to me. Like, hey, dude, I'm the same age as this kid. I want a dirt bike. That aspect, it really worked for me, just at the right time, right place, when that movie came out. But I don't remember if him being a good guy or a bad guy was a surprise, and I don't even know if it could have been, because I didn't even see the first Terminator movie at that point. So, but it didn't do anything for me. There was Arnold Schwarzenegger being an awesome Terminator. Put on those sunglasses, carry that gun, and do that little twirly thing while you're riding the bike. You win.
Yes. I don't know what else I could say about Terminator 2 without sounding just like a giant echo chamber, not just from what you said earlier, but I'm sure what Sean and Cody and every other YouTuber on Earth has to say about this movie, but I love Terminator 2. So many cool concepts, especially the ending where they defeat Cyberdyne, where they take out Skynet. It's like, whoa. I almost wished that I didn't watch the other movies before going into Dark Fate, because it's like, how cool would it have been to just let that be the fresh thing in my mind? Now Fate has been changed, right? What is the new T3, the third T3, gonna do with that?
Kind of going back to the Terminator being the father figure in T2, I actually, in my review for that, I made note that they both kind of swap, him and John Connor kind of swap back and forth on the father figure character. Even though John's a kid, he's teaching the Terminator, about humanity. And so they kind of switch roles. The T-800 is the protecting, protector father, and John Connor is the nurturing, educating father to the T-800. So I thought that was a really cool balance that those two had in that film.
And it was cool to watch Sarah grow in that film, where, she starts kind of psycho. She gets John back after John rescues her, and, John thinks he's going to get a hug from his mom, but she's just checking to make sure he has no injuries because she has no emotional attachment to him whatsoever. Then watching his attachment to this Terminator, she realizes it's not just about training him for the apocalypse. He needs love. He needs his mom. And so, all of that stuff I thought was just so good. It just keeps elevating that movie. So while I missed kind of the dark feel of the first Terminator, it got replaced by this incredibly interesting growth in this machine and in this family. Well, Steve, before we sign off, tell us about Film Trigger and where they can find you.
Well, Film Trigger, we are a young and evolving YouTube channel. But now I'm starting to dive into, not only doing movie reviews, but what it takes to actually critique a movie. And I'm just having a lot of fun doing it. And you can find my channel, Film Trigger, on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and the Facebook. Yeah, and Facebook. Come on over. Watch my content. If you like it, subscribe and become one of my Trigger happy friends.
Well, like I said, Stevie and I went to high school together, so our friendship goes way back. His channel is doing really good, and it's really cool to watch it grow, and it's really fun when he brings his son Seth on there. So definitely head over there to Film Trigger, hit that subscribe button, and hit that subscribe button right here and the bell by it, so that way you're notified the next time I do another ranking video, movie review, theological analysis, or anything else we do here. I'm Durbin. This is Stevie. Thanks for checking out Durbania.